Aloha, everyone. This is our Hawaiian Volcano summary for October 24th, 2024. It's been 1 month since the end of Kilauea's 5-day eruption near Nāpau Crater, and magma has continued to recharge into the volcano, uplifting the area near the eruption site, as visible in the satellite radar image that covers the first 2 weeks of October here. If we look at the earthquake map over the past week, we can see that there are now additional earthquakes occurring in that area, as well as in the upper East Rift connector, and continuing at a lower level beneath the summit caldera, and especially more so in the southern caldera area, right there. We still have ongoing south flank earthquakes as well, as that part of the volcano adjusts, moving southward away from the rift, and deep earthquakes in Pahala continuing their usual flare-up. So that's the activity of earthquakes as they look geographically. And looking at the earthquake counts, we can see that we have really jumped up over the last 3 days, where we've had a total of 133 earthquakes in that East Rift area, as reported by the USGS, compared to the previous 4 days, which had a total of only 18. So these counts you see on this graph here per day are for the entire map area that we showed of Kilauea, but it shows that same ratio, about a 4-fold increase in earthquakes over the last few days here. So that's similar to some of the recent intrusions that we've seen, and likely magma is still filling into this area. Looking at the plot of depth versus time for these earthquakes over the past week on Kilauea, we can see that it's not only the Pahala earthquakes, which do continue, maybe a little bit higher than average, but more so it's the shallow band of earthquakes that's accounting for the increased numbers. Looking at the ground tilt near the summit, the Sand Hill Station is showing us on the blue line the azimuth towards Halemaʻumaʻu, which appears to be stable, if anything deflating slightly over the last day, while at the same time, the green line that suggests the South Caldera source is inflating more so over the last few days here. So it could be a matter of shifting inflation sources as magma is filling the volcano summit area, and also finding a path to fill the East Rift. The East Rift stations of ground tilt, this one is the escape road. It's also showing more of a flat trend on the component that registers the recent intrusion and inflation on the Middle East Rift. It's more evident on a Puʻuʻōʻō tiltmeter further to the east that we have an increase from the west from that station, something that we also saw earlier in the month, which is what was picked up on that radar image. The blue line, which points straight to the rift area near the crater, beneath the crater, is showing a continued decrease, and recent visits from the USGS will show images of ferns growing due to the lack of sulfur in that area. So the crater is still 1,000 feet deep, more or less, and quiet, just picking up inflation from its west. And that's the story on Kilauea. While on Mauna Loa, there's been also a slight pickup in earthquakes over the last week, not nearly as great in numbers, but you see here the adjustments of earthquakes on Mauna Loa over the past week, which when we consider that depth versus time, we can see that these are all in that upper 10 kilometers of the crust, which is the adjustment area of the whole mountain as it continues swelling following its 2022 eruption. Here are the earthquake rates on Mauna Loa over the last month, earthquakes per day. The last 5 days, we've been at between 4 and 6 earthquakes in that summit area, fairly steadily, whereas the previous week, we were down between 0 and 2 for most of that time. We did reach a count of 9 last week, but that whole other week before that, we were in the range of 1 to 3 as well. So very slight increase. And if we look over the last year, we can see that in better context of how small an increase that is, while also still catching the event from 1 year ago, That was a deep flurry of earthquakes under Mauna Loa, which also is better seen in depth versus time. So you see the earthquakes, the deepest earthquake back in October of 2023 was down at 60 kilometers down, with some bands as shallow as 50 kilometers all the way up continuously to the surface. So that was a much larger adjustment within a volcanic edifice, which compared to what we're looking at just over the last week is much greater. So just for further reference, the adjustments we're seeing are much slower and normal within that upper part of the volcanic crust within the mountain. Overall, the pattern of expansion of the volcano is evident in a GPS, which repopulated for a few data points here over the last couple of weeks. And that's our volcano summary for this week.